we'll make a start then. So it's great to be actually standing in front of real people for Lecture for Change, even if there's virtual people too. Hello to the virtual people as well. My name is David Rayner. I'm training coordinator. Now I've lost the sound. I'm training coordinator at the Swedish National Data Service, which is a e-infrastructure, an electronic infrastructure run by the University of Gothenburg. And our role is to help research organizations with accessibility, preservation, and reuse of research data. And very quickly, what we do, we provide services for sharing data, publishing data, I like to say, so a data repository, and we provide research data support, for example, coming and talking to you today. And what I've been asked to talk about are the FAIR principles. How many people have heard of this before you saw the, yeah, we have a few people have heard of them before you saw the program here. So, the FAIR principles, they're really almost 10 years old now. They were officially launched with this paper in Scientific Data. But the history goes a little bit further back. So before the FAIR principles, there was something called the data citation principles. And the idea of this was that when you cite research, someone else's research in a research paper, you're always really careful to give a correct citation, author, title, journal, in your reference list, right? But when people were using data, they were saying data was provided by John Smith, personal communication. And people started to think, look, this really isn't good enough. We're really careful to say where we get our information from research papers, but then when it comes to data, we just give some reference that no one can ever check up. And so the data citation principles was the idea. You should cite data a bit like you'd cite a book. So in the old days, when you cite a book, you give the title and the publisher. But that doesn't mean that you give access. It's like, okay, I know what this book is. It's a good reference. I can probably go and find it somewhere. And that was more or less what the data citation principles thought data should be. It should be enough information that you can get that data. The FAIR principles goes further. This is like for the digital age. There's an expectation that if you cite something, someone can click on a link and you go there straight away. But the FAIR principles, if you've ever read the paper, goes way more than that. They said, yes, not only you should be able to find it, but your AI chatbot should be able to find it and download it and analyze it without, like, it should be so well described. And this was really before AI had hit the world. So these people saw it coming though. So now I'm going to get to the point. You get told you need to make data fair, but no one makes data so accessible that you can just say to ChatGPT, yeah, go and get it and do the analysis. So what is it we really talk about with FAIR? And this is what I'm going to go through today. We're not here yet. If people talk about FAIR and say, go and read the paper to find out what FAIR is, say, well, that's sort of the goal, but what do we actually mean when we say FAIR? We mean findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And the first part of this talk, I'm going to go through and explain with examples what these means, so you can see when you go to publish data, is this fair or not? So what is fair data? It's a set of principles. Ideally, it's for both humans and machines. And it doesn't require any specific technique. It's I'm not sure what a good example that would be. You could implement FAIR using different techniques. And so it's not a standard. There's no ISO FAIR, as it were. Or there's some, but they don't work very well. And I want to point out these last two up here. FAIR does not imply as open as possible. That's a different set of objectives, which I'm also going to talk about. And FAIR also doesn't make any assumptions about data preservation. The data should be available for the long term. That's also a different set of principles. You can have FAIR data that from some instrument that's renewed every day. FAIR's all about how you get to it. Right. From your point of view, you want to know, how do I make my data fair if I have to publish a data set? Well, basically, you publish the data on which your research results are based, either in a well-known subject-specific, I call it database, repository, public archive, there's different words for the same thing, or a curated research data repository, by which I mean a non-subject specific repository. And the bottom point here is that FAIR is something the repository has to do, mostly. So it's not something that you yourself have to think, I make my data fair by checking off all these criteria. It's the repository that has to check off all the criteria. And you have to get your data into a repository which meets these criteria. There's some things to think about, which I'm going to go through this in the second session when you publish data, but this is the basis of FAIR. So to give an example, maybe, this is a Zenodo data set. Have you met Zenodo before? Like, it's the most popular scientific research data repository. And it's got, where are we? Okay, it says what date it was published. There's a title. There's a whole heap of authors, and they have, does this work? No, it doesn't. I'll go back. They have ORCIDs. Over here, there's version information, there's citation. Compare, and here's a list of data sets down here. Compare that to if you were to just put your data on OneDrive and share the link. Right, it's the same data. They're both publicly available, but you can see it's not the same thing. One is really well described with lots of information, and the other is, well, you wouldn't even know what it is if someone hadn't told you. So that is the difference between fair data and not fair data, even if they're both openly available. All right. So, one question which comes up when you talk about publishing data or making data fair is, what is data? And it seems there's actually no universally accepted definition for what research data is. I say it's roughly, in practice, it's what your results and conclusions are based on. But there's lots of questions here. Like if I had non-research data, like climate data or census data, these are great for doing research on. Is it research data if no one has used it for research? What about data you collected but haven't analysed? Is that research data? What about data from a private company that us researchers would love to get hold of to analyse, but we're not allowed to? And then you get down to questions like, does it even have to be digital? Are numbers on paper data, or are they only data when you put them in a spreadsheet? And then finally, can it even just be physical? Are biological samples data? And don't know. What do you think? Because this last one I think is going to be interesting for you. You can't put them in a repository, but would you call them data or would you not call your samples data? Are they something different? I would call them samples. And you're done. Yeah, I think so. But not everyone agrees. This is interesting. We have a definition. Oh, maybe we don't need to go through that. But I say in general, here's a typical set of definition. Now, some of these things are things you expect to be data. 3D scans, images, survey data, experimental results. We know that's data. Other things you might not think so much as data. Field notes, instrumental calibration, software. Even if you don't call software data, it's definitely something that you publish and share, even if you don't do it quite the same way. Document of the scientific process. What's probably not data is your own notes, drafts, sketches, and I say physical samples, test runs. So test runs might or might not be. This is a good question, whether you consider them data or not. But maybe you don't want to share them. I can say I did my PhD using archived calibration data from a telescope, which everyone else would have thrown away in their own data records. But because the telescope policy was everything is stored, I could go back and get to this data set from many years. So what's useful might not be what you expect to be useful. All right, let's get into the FAIR principles then. I'm not going to go through them all. What I'm going to try and do is pick out individual aspects of the FAIR principles and give some examples. So findable. Data set should have a unique and persistent identifier. Maybe I'll go through them one at a time then, rather than listing them all off first. What do we mean by a unique and persistent identifier? We mean something like a digital object identifier. You've seen these codes here, I guess. Everyone, yeah. So it's become common now that you cite them in an article, and the advantage with these things is that there's a data site, or there's two organizations which maintain the list. So if you have this thing this code should never change. This address should not change, even if the organization that hosts the data, if their website changes. So this has just happened to us. We've changed our website address from snd.gu for Gothenburg University.se, and we've taken out the Gothenburg University. So it's now just snd.se. And those links will live for some time, the old redirects, but eventually they'll die. You won't be able to get to the data sets by going to the snd.gu.se links, because we're probably going to change owners. That's why we need to change it. And this happens, right? But these links, these will survive because we go into DataSite and we say, okay, this link, this now has to point to a new web page. And that's why these links are preferred to just a URL for an organization. Digital object identifier is the most common type of identifier, but there's others. There's handle. There's also UUID, which is just that long string of randomly generated numbers that probably two people will never choose the same number in the age of the universe, basically. So when I talk about an identifier, they usually mean something like that. So how fair is fair? Now, this is the thing I wanted to get into, that there's no, my data set is fair or is not fair. All data sets are somewhere on a scale from being not fair to being like perfect, and nothing is perfect. So we can say DOI are pretty good as long as the organization that manages them doesn't collapse, because then we're all out. UUIDs are pretty good. They're practically unique, but if someone wants to scam one, they could. They can say, oh, look at a data site, copy it, and say, I'll use the same one. So, whereas you can't just scam a DOI because you can't control where it goes. Ascension numbers, and by here I mean something like an archive number. Has anyone ever used your organization's archive? And I'm guessing this would be a no. It's nearly always no. All organizations have an archive where you have to put in your economic information, and if you're getting grants, you'll need to file paperwork. And every time you do that, they give you a number. And that's a persistent identifier, and it's unique, but it's not as good as a DOI. If I tell you an archive number for a Swedish university, you think, well, that's great, but how does it help me get the actual document? But we're going to see more of these in a little bit. In fact, we're going to see one right now. So here is National Library of Medicine. I forget what this archive is, Gene Bank. And when you submit data here, you get an ascension number. Here it's called. So there's no DOI here. So on a fair scale, yep, this is good, but it's not as fair as if it was a DOI, for example. Whoops, Daisy, what happened there? Right. Now the next part of findable is that data should be described with rich metadata, which of course raises the question of what's metadata? And again, there's no universal definition, but I can say it's structured information that describes, explains, locates, or otherwise represents something else. It's, in this case, data about data. There's no hard boundary between data and documentation. So what type of file formats are you all using? Here's a good question. For let's take who's actually getting data straight out of an instrument here? Yeah. What file formats do you? Sorry? JPK. Okay, not a file format I know. Sorry? You have to speak up a little bit. Oh, H5. Okay, H5 I know. So a H5 file is a hierarchical file where you can have lots of information in that file. So compare that to, let's say, a CSV file, a comma-separated variable file, where all you have is a column heading and lots of numbers. And your column heading might just be a variable name, tvar or something. It tells you almost nothing, right? Whereas a H5 file, presumably, if there's a variable, someone has an explanation for what that variable is, right? So you can say that that's metadata. That's variable level metadata, file level metadata. Here we're talking a little bit higher level. So metadata, what subject does this data set address? Is it biology or is it social sciences? Is there a title for the data set? That's the type of metadata which we talk about here. So we can say often, well, let's go into what different different types of data set. There's descriptive metadata, which helps with discovery and identification. A data set should have a title, an abstract or description, creator, which is the same as author. We usually say a data set has a creator and a paper has an author, but you cite them the same way, right? Keywords, geographical area, time period. And then you can go down into the more detail, structural metadata, variable names, units, sampling procedures. What's the files in the data set? Administrative metadata. Who owns it? Who funded it? How do you get access to it? And finally, rights management, which I'm not going to talk much about today, but a license, for example, or copyright statement or terms of use. These are all aspects of metadata. So fair data has to have these type of descriptions. That's it. Only problem with wearing a microphone when you've got a cold. Metadata have to be registered or indexed in a searchable resource, the third part of FAIR. Typically, they're registered with DataCite when you make a DOI. But Google likes to know the metadata too. So you could say, all the metadata I had on the previous slide, you could just have a text file or a web page with all this information, right? And the metadata's there, but it's not the same as structuring up that information so DataCite or Google can find it. So let's take an example of a dataset landing page. This is from, I don't even remember which data, a data repository for social science data. And there's a title, there's a description, it's got a DOI. But if you were to view the page source, inside you'll find some JSON with, it's just a markup language, with all this information in a way a computer can understand it. Organization, data, type, dataset, ID, DOI, name, version, creator, date published. So when we're talking FAIR, and I say the repository has to do the work, this is what I mean. Like you put in the data in a text, in a web format usually, and then the repository, they've got to present it for you as a people when you're going to look at it, and they've got to present it so that Google can find it and other data aggregators can find it. So that's, yeah, this is what FAIR is about. Yeah, not all metadata are indexed. Right. Are we going to do this? Time is going on. What, you got your laptops there? Most of you. All right. Can you, if you want to, what you can do is go to this schema checker. You can type this one in straight away without reading a QR code. It's relatively short. Yeah. Sorry? Oh, you can't read it. Yep. Do you have a group chat for whole everybody? Yep. Okay. Someone posted in the group chat. That'd be great. Right. So when you've got that, now what I want you to do is then we go to a data repository. I don't mind which one you go to. You can take a Zenodo or you can take how do we go? I'm going to take our data repository just because I'm going to take a random data set, tailored forest damage inventory. Here we go. All right. Where are we here? It's a bit slow. I think I just pressed escape there. All right, and what I'm going to do is, and you can take any data set you want. If you take copy it, put it into your markup checker, and gee, I hope this works. It'll be very embarrassing having tried. What you should find is that it says there's page information. This is URL information, but then you go down a bit more and it'll say, aha, here I found some metadata. And lots of information in a way that a computer can understand about this data set. And this is a good way to check how you've got a repository and you think, okay, how well is Google or other aggregators are going to find my data set? Are they going to know it's a data set? Take the link and you put it into this checker and see whether is there metadata underneath. It's much easier than going and looking at the source file. Has anyone tried a Zenodo data set? Yeah? What happened? You get lots of data, right? The thing to point out though is that what you find here is not necessarily the same as what's on the what we call the home page. There's often more information here than the repository might make available to Google, for example. But yeah, so if you want to find out if there's metadata, this is a good way of doing it. All right, let's go for number 2. Metadata are retrievable from the identifier. And this one, well, we've sort of talked about this one. You have a DOI, and the thing with this DOI is you can use it to make a URL. So the DOI is the 10.5, whatever it is. You turn it into a URL like this, you click it, and you get to the data set. We all know that. So let's think about that ascension number we had before from the GeneBank data set. Yeah, you can actually use that one too. There's the ascension number. If you know what to do, then you can get to the data set from its identifier. But yeah, I wouldn't have guessed this from the start. So DOI is a bit easier. Everyone knows what to do with how to turn a DOI into a URL. Whereas other archives, you may have to go to them first and you work out what to do. And other archives, like institutional archives, you usually can't do this. If you archive something, you'll get a number, and they say thank you very much, but you can't turn it into a URL. So this is also the question: how fair is fair? Can you do this with your repository or not? It's good if you can. Built with open standards. This is the next part of accessible. And open standards, I mean, we know what it is. It's email. It's a URL address. You can send an email to anyone on any platform from anyone on any platform. Whereas there's some other standards for other ways of sharing data that are way more trouble. You can't use or couldn't use iMessage on Android, and Android and OS, they're great in terms of features and usability, but it's often quite a difficult task to send users, to send data between them. You need to use a third party, you need to use a Discord or something. So they're not there's lots of standards out there that aren't open standards, which you can use for sharing information, but they're not really fair. Yes, as was commented in 2002, what we need is return to open standards in communication so that you can chat to anyone on any platform with any app. All right. Provide the exact conditions under which data are accessible. Now, I said at the start that fair doesn't mean openly accessible. In fact, fair explicitly goes in for data that's not, like says, how do you deal with data that's not openly accessible? And the requirement is you need to say how you can get the data. So here's a Zenodo dataset, Turkish pedestrian dataset, which is restricted. This record is publicly accessible, but the files are restricted to users with access. Okay, well, to who? But if you go down further, and you don't need to go through all this, they explain in like lots of detail who they're going to give the data to. So it's not machine readable, I have to say. That would be the next stage. But they're pretty clear. Dataset comes as is. You have to include a reference. Don't redistribute. Don't use it for derivative works or commercial purposes. So this is fine. This is fair. Another important point is that metadata should be able to be accessed even if the data set is withdrawn. So here's an example, and most commonly data sets are withdrawn because, in our repository anyway, people withdraw data sets because they've published a new version and they don't want maybe they found mistakes in the old version, they don't want that to be available anymore. So what we make is what's called a graveyard page or gravestone page. It has the metadata, but you can't get to the files. So it says, here's a description of the data set. This one actually doesn't have this one was completely withdrawn. Now I look at it, it says version 2, the latest version, but there is no newer version. Dataset was withdrawn at the request of the researcher. I don't know the history of this. But think about this with fair data, is that once the metadata is published, the idea is that you will never delete it. Okay? The files can be deleted, but the actual description, can be edited as well. So if you make a mistake, you can fix it. But when you've made this data public and you've got a digital object identifier, in principle, the metadata should stay. And if you later on, I guess in extreme cases, I broke the law, I said something that I shouldn't have said, then it will be withdrawn. And this actually happens, I've heard examples where this has happened, where, maybe we'll talk about it later, but in national security data. But in principle, the metadata stays. Interoperable. Data and metadata are described according to known and common vocabularies. I'll start with an obvious one here, which is this, ORC-ED. How many of you have your own ORC-ID? Yes. Right. At the end of at the most next week, everyone has to have their hand up, okay? You need to register yourself here to be a researcher these days, more or less. And the reason to have this is have a look at the rest of the information on who an author is. In this case, Joel Hansen, Lund University, Department of Technology and Society. If that was the only information we gave, what's the potential problems there? If you want to know who made this data set. Yes. So this is the first problem. What happens if there's two? There are potentially two in the same department. It's unlikely, but it might happen. Maybe he leaves and someone else with the same name. Sven Svensson is the Swedish equivalent of like John Smith. It's the most common name in the country. And so a big university, yeah, there'll be different people with the same name, the same university, same department at different times. Absolutely. But also, this person might change their name if they get married or for whatever reason. They very, very likely will move to another organization at some stage. And you all think this, whatever you have here for whatever you publish now in 5 years' time is probably going to be old. So this is what the researcher ID is for. It's a unique identifier for you, and you connect to it. You go into the ORCID page. Do I even have a screenshot for that one? Oh, okay. And here you can describe like what you do. This one doesn't have. You can put in lots of information, but people mainly put in their organization. Some people even put their email address and everything public, but you don't have to do that. And the other thing that should happen is that the anytime someone, a journal or a data repository publishes something with your ORCID, they should register it here so that it gets automatically added to your works. And I found this doesn't always work very well, but this would be really nice to have someone else automatically making your publication list for you, collecting it up. What more should I say about ORCID? No, other than that, you need one, right? Yes, okay. You go in and you get it yourself. It's free. Has anyone used it as a login? Yeah. So they also run an authentication service. So once you have an ORCID, you can log into Zenodo, for example, with your ORCID. Say? It's annoying. Well, this is it. Okay, why do you find it? What have you found with? Yeah, maybe. I find my browser remembers mine, so I never. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I have an enormous collection of emails. Yeah. Ah, okay. I see. So you're saying what you need to log, it's difficult to log in. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's true. Have you published anything with your ORCID yet? Right. So that is there forever now. If you ever need to know your ORCID, you can always look at your publication and see what it is. Okay, yes. I think you can register multiple addresses. Is that right? I don't remember, but I think you can have multiple email addresses. But I can say for me, it's been a really handy way to keep track of myself and what I've done. And usually, not always, any repository or journal that uses your ORCID, it will give a link. Anyone who's added one, they'll have a link to the with the ORCID. It will come up as a link, which you can then click to go to the person's homepage. So it's good advertising for yourself when you publish something and the repository automatically includes a link to all your other works, including your papers. This is like the best advertising for you as a researcher that you can get. So don't hop over it. Should I go, before I go back, I just note that there's, no, oh, wrong one. Here, the organization has a code too. This is called the raw ID, I guess you would say in, is that bad? Research organization ID. And it's basically the same thing for organizations as ORCID is for you as individuals, because organizations change their name too. And it should be at a higher level. This one, I don't know. Maybe you want to put it in, maybe you don't. Right. Metadata can be linked to other information. So here, in this case, this is a data set, Nature's Calendar, phenological observations made by citizen scientists. And there's a ascension number, there's a DOI, and then it says this is part of a collection where you can go to and find other information related to this data set. So in this case, the collection will have other data sets. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So the collection information, it says who owns it and then which data sets are part of this collection. Not all repositories support this. Zenodo has communities. Now, have you met communities? No. So if you haven't, your project maybe even wants to create your own community where you can collect up sort of an umbrella collection for all the data that's generated in the project. I don't know if there's anything for publications, but that would be useful too. I'd say one of the most common, talk about metadata can be linked to other information. The most common, most important thing to link to when you make a data set is you link to a research article, of course, with a DOI. So that I'd say is the most important part of interoperable metadata. Ooh, okay, reusable. This is maybe the trickiest part of the lot. You can make a data set available, but can someone else understand it? Can they like load up the data and analyze it? And here it's really a subjective assessment. Most of the things I've talked about before, they are, yeah, it's up to the repository. They need to do something. They need to make sure metadata is available in different forms. But here, documentation, this is up to you. And we'll talk more about that later on, what to do with documentation. However, Reusable means more than just someone can understand it. It also means you should have some usage rights. So I can get the data set. What am I allowed to do with it? Can I use it for commercial purposes? Can I include it in my own data set? Now take your data set, make some changes, and make it available again. Am I allowed to do that? Is that what you intended? So here we talk about licenses, and why do I have this one here? Ah, all right, yes, okay. Somewhere down further in this data set, there's a license. We'll talk more about, is it in this slide or next slide? I don't remember. No, we're going to talk about licenses later. But the good thing with these Creative Commons licenses, have you all met these? Everyone's seen, they're often used CC BY, they're often used both on data and they're used for research publications. They're the most common way, and software has its own set of licenses, MIT, GPL. So these are the most common ways of describing license conditions, what you're allowed to do with data. And the reason they're preferred is because they have a link to an actual legal document. So this is usually all that you see on a web page, but underneath that is an actual more formal description of what it means. And so you can, when you publish a data set, you can write your own usage conditions. It can be used for, my favorite is the JSON license. Has anyone ever heard of this? Does anyone know what JSON is? It's just a way of structuring, it's just a data format, right? And there's a parser called JSON lint. And the license is a pretty standard license, except for the one line which says, this software shall be used for good, not evil. And he thought this was a pretty obvious thing to put in a license. And it made so much problem for big companies who had their lawyers that says, is what we're doing good or evil? How do we know? Who will decide this? So apparently some legal, this really split the community. Is this a good thing to have in license conditions? Or is this really silly? Are you just making things more complicated? I don't know. Yeah. It's way more complicated than he thought when he put it in, but he's refused to retract it. He said, if you don't know whether what you're doing is good or evil, you shouldn't be doing it. But he's also had companies say, can you give us a specific license that doesn't have this condition? Because this is something to think about. If you, for example, publish a data set as a non-commercial license, a CC BY, a Creative Commons non-commercial, that means anyone can come and take it from the repository and they're not allowed to use it for commercial purposes. But if some company comes to you and says, we need this and here's $100,000 if you give us a commercial license, you can give them a commercial license. And it doesn't interfere with what's on the homepage. So you can make something available with multiple licenses to multiple licensees. That's not that's not prohibited. And so he said, yeah, of course I can give you a special license. And I don't remember the company, but it was basically this company is allowed to use this software for evil purposes. And the lawyer said, okay, that's good enough for us. So, but there's lots of questions. If you decide to make your own licenses, it can be more complicated than you might think. Let's take some basic information for some basic metadata and say, how was it? The Leeds University repository and the contact engineering. So data sets, do they have a title? I mean, the Leeds one I think has a pretty clear title, right? Yep. There we go. Ah, I see. Now, how do I fix this? Let's go. Yep. Here we go. All right, so this data set has a clear title. It's not called title, but you can see that what the title is by looking at the page. If we take contact engineering, well, it's sort of got some sort of name. Okay, but this is maybe when we talk about rich metadata being described by rich metadata, this is maybe not the same class as data associated with thermoelectric fingerprinting, right? They're both a title, it's both a string, but the information content is a bit different. Yeah. And then we have a description. And yep, you can see this one has a pretty good description. And yeah, some of these have, I think that's a description. So if we go here, yeah, no, not really. So, and here I can say it's not as if the repository doesn't allow people to put in a description. It's just that they haven't been used. It hasn't been used. Has anyone? I don't know if I'm offending anyone here when I'm talking about contact engineering. I'm not meaning to, but I'm just saying, illustrating what the difference between fair and not fair here, and then we have some keywords, subjects. And you can see the way these are written that they come from some other dictionary or vocabulary, right? Someone in the UK has a formal list of how you divide up research into subjects. We have one in Sweden. There's an EU one as well. And so it's not just a string of text. It's actually some formal list. And the good thing about using these type of lists, this is this part of this interoperability criteria, is it means that when two people choose the same keyword, they should be able to choose the same thing. So I'm not sure what else you might choose rather than solid state physics, but if you're thinking social sciences, if you're making a study of, oh, I don't know, the alcohol habits of under 13s, like what field is this? Is this health? Is this social sciences? Maybe you need more than one, but it's nice if everyone can choose the same. And it's really nice when you have a repository that is multilingual, that regardless of whether people are using it in Swedish or English or Spanish or whatever, that people can find it. Have one dictionary with everything translated is so much better than a text. All right. The contact engineering, so it has the option of categories, even if they weren't used. I don't know what would be here if you could upload one. It looks like it's some sort of fixed list, so that's good. What else did you find the difference between these in terms of fair? What did you look for these two data? An ORCID, yes. So below. Yeah. It does have ORCID. Excellent. In fact, it even has raw ID. So they've really filled this out. Also, something I didn't note is there's with data sets, when you publish a data set, you're often given the option of associating people with roles, much more than with a publication. When you publish a paper, everyone is just an author, usually, everything I've ever been involved in. Whereas a data set, you'll nearly always have an option of creator or some type of acknowledgement support type role that you can attach. And usually this means that if someone goes to cite the data set, do they provide it? Yes, and here they provide a citation. Usually everyone who's listed as a creator will be in here, but if you're listed as assistant or whatever, you're not. So think about that whenever you go to publish a data set. Who you list as creator, think about it more or less the same way as when you publish an article. Who should be the author on this article? Who should be the author on this data set? Who didn't really, who might have, it'll depend on your field. So for example, in our in biological data sets, when there's students out doing field work in the summer to collect, do they get to be an author? Usually not. Okay, what else did you look for when you were assessing fairness? License, nice. And who had a license? This one has a license, yeah? Uh-huh. So this one, they listed a CC and the README, often it states in the README there as well. Let's just go straight into that. Whee! So there's a whole heap of information in this README file. This one is really, oh, and this one has like a full terms of use. Okay, that's good. This one, how to cite? And they do have a license. It's released under CC0, which means you can do anything with it. And we'll talk more about licenses later. But they also have the citation. Has anyone ever met DOI citation formatter? That's a really useful thing, actually, if you've never met that one before. So this one can save you quite a lot of time. If you've got a DOI and you say, okay, now I want to cite this data set, go to the citation.doi.org, just enter in the DOI and it will pull out from their database who's the author and any other information, the publisher, in this case, Contact Engineering. That's a useful link to a useful one to remember, that one. Right. So one thing we didn't talk about was the digital object identifier, and they both have one. So essential part of FAIR, yeah. What do you look for other things? Yes. Yes. So what were you interested in about the files? Whether there is right, exactly. So how reusable are the files? So it's not strictly unfair to make something available in a proprietary format, but it's not as good as an open format. It's on this how fair is fair scale. So how did they go here then with the files? Now I'm not going to know what these are. What are they making available here? Someone can help me tell me. Is it download maybe? Okay. This is probably going to be too big. Right. Okay. We have. So for you people now, you're looking at this. Is this, you have to tell me if this is reusable or not. It's got a README. I'll just extract it here. Oh, which one is it? Is it this one? Right. It had a README. That's good. I mean, this is pretty good. Yeah, in terms of reusability, they've got a description of what's in here. No, that's all there is. Okay, well, at least it says there's 2 files for each measurement, original files. Alternative is a netcdf3 with a minus squeezed. Okay. Metadata for the original can be found in the meta.yaml. So there's some information about what's in this archive. Shall we compare to the other one then? Where are we? No, it's not that one. No? Have I shut down everything? Oh, it's Firefox. Here we go. Let's compare to this README. Are we here? So they have a lot of administrative data in the README. I'm not sure you need to do that. They have terms of use. But what do they have about the files? But this looks pretty comprehensive. Repository contains the folders, measurement methods, experimental data sets associated with figure 1. I love this file name, but that's okay. So in both cases, they tried to explain what the files are. The files were they were formats that you familiar with. What's this one here? It is it's another zip file. So this, all right, so there's a bit of a difference here. You can see here we've got they've thought about the organization, which compared to here is a bit more messy, right? Yeah. Experimental data. So you have to know what these are, is that right? They don't have a suffix, or maybe a suffix is just not displayed. Oh. Did anyone open this and can tell me if there's a file suffix on these? It does. It's just here it's not shown. I'm not going to play with someone else's computer to get it to work in Spanish because that would be disaster. But oh, it's a text file. Okay. Okay. Oh, all right. So it's a width values. So it is a text file, but is it a file that there's software which knows how to read this data in? Is that the Gideon file or whatever it is? I don't know. Yeah, okay, there must be. It's not something they'd invented themselves, I don't think. Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. So reusable, it would seem, was pretty good. So did anyone try putting the URL into the metadata extractor? Yes. How did it go for the two URLs? Nothing in either of them? No. Okay. Yep. So, and okay. Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. So there's two, or there's many, but there's two common ways of like conventions for metadata in web pages. This is not my field at all, but there's a sort of a standard HTML type markup, and then there's the schema.org markup, which is more formal description. So at least they have something. And okay, in this case, that's not a it's not too bad because they do have this. Oh, what's this going to do? They have a DOI, right? So there must be metadata associated with that, with this DOI, with DataCite, because that's how with this page here, we could just put in the DOI and then we got the author, the publication year, the publisher, for example. So even if there was no metadata embedded in their landing page, they have at least made it available because they must have given it to DataCite to get a DOI, because that's what you have to do. I don't have the link for getting that out. I can't remember off the top of my head. So yeah, They have here, we talked about links to other interoperability, links to other information, and they have links to publications here, a DOI and an ePrints. Did this one have, I don't know if this one had anything similar. I didn't find anything. Did anyone else find anything? Should I speak? They didn't. No. So, okay. I haven't looked through in details all of them, but yes, but it's not obvious to me coming to this landing page. So you follow a DOI, you come here. But if you were to come here first and want to know, okay, this is great, where's the research article? There doesn't seem to be any way back. Whereas in reality, it's usually pretty hard to use data if you can't get to the research article and find out the description. And sometimes it's, sometimes you can actually, like if it's a survey data, very standardized methodology, but this, I'm not sure. But on the other hand, this seems to offer some more functionality. I don't know what this site does, but it gives you like an analyze function here. I don't know if it works, but maybe you need to sign in. I'm not sure. Oh no, there we were. Slope distribution. You click it. Right. So here you've got some functionality that our other site didn't have. And this is pretty common across fields, that sometimes the repository is really nice. On the FAIR scale, the LEADS repository is doing really well. They've got lots of metadata. Everything's been filled in. But there's nothing, the only thing you can do with the data set is download it. Whereas the contact engineering, on the FAIR scale, they're a little bit lower, you can say. You can't see, it's hard to even know who, like what organization even published this data set. Was it even, I don't even know if it was, if you could even tell, right? You can see who the author is only because it's here, but where do they even work? There's a lot of information missing. But on the other hand, it has all this functionality, which I don't know what it does, but I'm assuming that someone went to a lot of trouble to make this website, so it must be useful to people. So we'll talk about this more this afternoon, but when you choose to publish your data, there's pros and cons with different repositories. Often the more subject-specific repositories have better functionality, but they're not always as fair. There's nothing stopping you publishing twice, of course, if you want to. You can, I mean, it makes it a bit silly, but might sound silly, but you can publish, sometimes you want to publish slightly different data files. Here, maybe you need to upload specific types of data files to format. Another repository, maybe you want to make more openly available file formats, for example. You can also, in some repositories, you can in ours, you can make a link that references another repository. Say, I want to make a catalog entry. I don't need a new DOI. I already have a DOI, but that catalog couldn't add much description, much information. So here I can put in all the authors and all their ORCIDs and things. And if you know, like, I don't know how well these data sets in contact engineering, how well does Google find them? How well does DataSite Search find them? If it doesn't do very well, you can make another entry somewhere else. But it's a bit of work, I'd have to say. A more common solution might be that you put the process data in here. Maybe you put raw data somewhere else. All right. I think that's most of the things I wanted to talk about for these two repositories. But I hope I'm going to talk a little bit more before we finish for this session. Do you feel you have a bit of a feeling now for what FAIR is about? It's not less hypothetical. I hope so. Do you have any questions before we keep going? No. All right. Ooh, now, the other thing. Right. So we've done a lot of FAIR. So when you get research funding, the funder will probably have some conditions, say, make your data fair. They might say that, but they're also likely to, oh, it's in Swedish. How did that happen? No, it's okay. It's here as well. They also often have the phrase, as open as possible, as closed as necessary, or something like that. So, and by open, they mean published and freely available on the internet. And this is an EU goal for research, for publicly funded research in the European Union. The Commission wants data as open as possible. So this is not the same as FAIR. FAIR is just how well described is everything. Can you reuse it if you can get it? But as open as possible is a different priority. It really means you should make your data open. And you can go through. You should check out your university, your home university, and see if they have a policy. And if so, find out what it is. This is Karlstad University research data, which are the result of partly or wholly public funding. And this is a big question. What happens if you have 5% public funding and 95% private funding? Well, this still applies. It should be available without charge to further research on the condition there are no legal, ethical, technical, or commercial reasons otherwise, which is a pretty long list of conditions there at the end. And yes, Open Research Europe has the same. Require open access to research data supporting articles under the principle as open as possible, as closed as necessary. I haven't looked at your funding, but I'm pretty sure that you'll be subject to this. You can also find some journals have open data policies. And journals, usually they have a spectrum of policies. There's the we encourage data to be open, but some actually have a really hard criteria. Ecology and evolution requires, as a condition of publication, that data supporting the results in the paper should be archived in an appropriate public archive, which is what they mean, what I call a research data repository. And authors are required to archive their data in a publicly accessible repository, such as Dryad, Figshare, GeneBank, etc. and clearly state in their manuscript where the data will be deposited. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, the chicken and egg problem of, do you make the data available first? Do you publish the paper first? There's sort of a way through that these days. But the short is, they won't publish an article, they won't press the final publish button until they see the data are public. You can't fake it with them and say the data is available on request. And some fields, this is more common than others. So ecology and evolution, you can think they can do this because there's rarely going to be reasons, ethical or legal or commercial reasons, why the data can't be made available. This is not medical research where it's like, oh, you can't just say everything has to be available on the internet. But ecology and evolution, probably not so often a problem. Okay, I want to take a little step though. Okay, so there's all this pressure from our government. They say you make your research data available. Why? Who's going to reuse it? And actually, there's some research starting to happen on who benefits and why. So just summarizing some results from a paper, what do people reuse data for if you publish it? Obviously, you can use it for new studies, usually by combining it with some other data is most common. It's rare that you publish data, someone just takes it and they write a new research article, because you would have done that yourself if it was so easy. But they can take it, they can add their data and publish it. Feasibility studies, project proposals. Has anyone done this? Often you research data, you want to test an idea. You need to convince some funding body that you should give me money for this. And you're going to need to collect data, but maybe you can get some other data just to test the idea out. Maybe there's not enough replicates, maybe it's not exactly the data you would want to use, but you can at least test the analysis. You can make a figure, you can show that it works. Calibration, verification. I'm from earth science background and a climate modeling background. And we love to get real data to see, does the model work? Or just to set up the starting initial conditions to run the model forward. So very often people want data. They don't really want your data to analyze it, but they need to make their research work, and you need something to keep going with. Teaching is really a big reuser of data. We know from our repository, publicly available data, of course, we have no idea who uses for what, but data with personal information you have to apply to get. And teaching is actually the biggest use case. Either it's master's students, they need to get data and they don't have time to go out and do the research themselves, but they see, okay, these survey and that survey I can use. Or it's teachers who are doing, like, they need case studies for their students and they want to give them real data to use rather than fake data. And so they'd like to reuse some existing research data. Promote collaboration. Oh yeah. If you want to reuse data, you don't need to get it from a repository. You can actually email the author of a manuscript and say, can we cooperate on this? And if they've got their data organized, so it doesn't take too much time for them to pull it out, often people are pretty happy. If it's something really new, really sensitive, maybe not. But in many cases, if you say, well, I could do this, would you like to be part of it? You have a student who would work with me. It's a good way to make a network. So keep that in mind. From the funder's point of view, they're more interested in this, like, it's a democratic society. You're using tax money, so your data should be available for everyone, and research transparency. You claim something in a paper, you should make your data available so people can verify what you've done. For me, I don't consider reproducibility and reuse as the same. I think they're sort of different, different aspects of the scientific process. If you make your data available for reproducibility, someone can check it, that's one thing. But that someone can take it and use it for a totally new purpose is sort of a different thing. But anyway, this is how people benefit. Are you going to be reusing data from other people? Yes. I mean, you're going to be using it within the project, but are you bringing in data from outside the project? Yes. Tell me what's happening. Did you get the data or not? Or yeah. But this is personal data of some type, I guess. Patient data or yeah. So that's usually always the case that they have to check that they comply with GDPR and all these things. So, but yeah. I can say as researchers, you have amazing access to personal data under GDPR. It's like you say, we're doing something in the public interest. Okay. Journalists also have unlimited access to data. Keep that in mind. Everyone, companies, much more restricted. But why should you do this? Well, maybe you can avoid some unnecessary experiments, unnecessary costs. You can synthesize data from multiple studies. Sometimes for metadata analysis, sometimes there's just a lot of data out there that can be reused. Obtain ground truthing and calibration data. I don't know if that's relevant for you. That was always really relevant for me. Data for teaching, absolutely. Yeah. Is the burden on over-researched populations? I don't know how much this will affect you, but this is really important in social sciences. Indigenous populations, there's vulnerable groups in our community. And of course, researchers want to help these people and do research on them, research with them. But problem is, if you're someone in a vulnerable situation and you have researchers coming to you over and over again saying, I would like to do an interview, I'm doing a study, you can see that they start to feel this is not benefiting me. You're doing research about me, but it's not helping. So if ever you're working with groups like that, think, is there data I can reuse without having to go and intrude on these people again? 10 minutes, we'll be fine. Okay, cite your data. If you publish a data set, cite it in your own article. And this is a bit different to when journals don't like it when you cite all your publications, because I think you're just trying to get up your citation rate, okay? But this is what you're meant to do. This is the right thing to do. Usually in your data availability statement, you say, do I have it? I think it's in the next next slide for the next session. But yes, how you write a data availability statement. But yes, every data set should have a citation, and you include it in your article. Right. Very quickly now, because we're going to do most of this afternoon. What if you can't make your data openly available? Now, there's two aspects here, and we'll talk about them both this afternoon. You might not want to make your data openly available because you might do more research on it. That's one thing. But then there's also this data contains personal information. This data contains information on threatened species, something where you're just not allowed to, or it's not ethically justifiable to make it openly available. What do you do? Well, the best thing is to publish with restricted access. So publishing data in a research data repository does not imply that the data has to be freely available. And we saw an example of that before with the big list of orange terms and conditions, and you had an example yourself. I don't know if it was in a research data repository, but somehow you got access to data that was by applying for it. So yes, you can publish a data set in a repository with restricted access. Now, the reason I have the book on the side is you can think about data, publishing data, a little bit like publishing a book. So if you publish a book, there's this, you make it clear, there's this entity which is a book, right? And if two people get the same book, they get the same thing to all intents and purposes. It's not the same physical copy, but you've created a defined entity which people can then try and access. So when we talk about accessible, we mean it's there. It might not be available to you. You might not be able to get it. And so the example I have here is the book Open Data for Everybody Using Open Data for Social Good, which is available for $100 in hard copy. But it illustrates the point that just because it's published doesn't mean anyone can get it. For books, you have to pay for it. For data, you rarely have to pay for it unless it's enormous or you're buying it from a private company, but you have to satisfy legal requirements that you're allowed to have it. So if you do this, if you publish with restricted access, your data is still fair if it's in a research data repository. Question, yeah. Yep. We'll take this aside in the next session. We've got, as I say, personal information just takes over the, the session. So I'll just introduce it now. What to do, what are your options if you have data that you can't make available? The best option is to find a repository you can publish it in. And it's important to note that protected data can be reused for research. You have to decide the ethics yourself of making it available and of reusing it. And probably an ethics committee will be involved. So we hold some data sets with sensitive personal information. If another researcher wants to reuse that data set, they have to apply for ethics permission exactly as if they were going to collect it themselves, basically, to get access to it. So depending on the sensitivity of the information, you might have to do that. You need the right legal or technical framework. So if you go to Zenodo, they say explicitly, you can't publish personal information with us, regardless of whether you set access restricted or not. They don't have the right legal frameworks in place. So we have, for us, we're the Swedish repository, so we have agreements with all the universities that they can publish with us. If someone else comes in, we'll say, we can do it, but you have to sign this. Okay, and Zenodo is just too big for that. They can't go and do individual contracts with individual researchers. But if your university has their own research data repository, this nearly always works. That's the good thing. What about metadata only data descriptions? this is something you'll often hear written, is that if you can't make the data available, make the metadata available so people can request it. Now, a metadata only dataset description, I'll call it, is basically the same. It looks the same as what we've looked at today, like the Lee's dataset, but there's no data files. And it's not just that the data files are hidden from you, they're not there. They haven't been attached to the dataset. And we don't like these. We accept that sometimes they have to be done, but our experience is that when people make a metadata only data description, the data disappears because no one's got a formal preservation strategy that says someone at the institute needs to keep track of this data. So metadata only data description is not the same as publishing with restricted access. When you publish with restricted access, you have to provide the data files to the repository, and then they stop other people getting it until they request it. Closed review I'll talk about later, and external data sets descriptions we don't really need to talk about, but that's when you describe a data set that has a DOI somewhere else. And as I say, this is just our organization. We don't encourage this, but we acknowledge sometimes you have to do it because it's the best you can do. Here's a metadata. Here's an external description where this is in our catalog, but the DOI just goes somewhere else. And the researchers, they say, so this Figshare repository, it wasn't in the national catalog, but the researchers wanted their data set to show up in the national catalog, so they just make an external.